Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. I've got Emma Hutchinson and Hare from HorseBack UK, based up in the wilds of Aberdeenshire. They kind of do everything. Started with the military, still working with the military, but then transitioned also into kids, at-risk youth, all sorts of programs and populations over the years. And I would say that in terms of mentorship for people that are looking, particularly within the UK, to get involved in the equine assisted field, HorseBack UK are really people to look to, because unlike many programs who target very much one population set or one type of therapeutic outcome, HorseBack UK are unusually eclectic, and yet they integrate the whole thing in a really interesting way. And of course, they do this from a rather wonderful fairy tale location up there in fairy tale land, which is Aberdeenshire. Extremely beautiful. So can you guys introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. Do you want to kick off, Jay?
My name's Hare. Jason, but everyone calls me Jay. I'm the course director for HorseBack UK. Next month, I will have been at the charity for 15 years after being seconded here by the Royal Marine Commandos back when I went through my rehabilitation and was healing after injuries sustained in combat.
And what do you do now? You say you're directing, but what does that mean?
So yeah, it's kind of a posh title, really, isn't it? Course director, but I think what it entails is actually helping them to design the programs and the qualifications that we deliver here, as well as in part delivering them, and also working with our mentors so that we give a good product, a good program, a good outcome to whether it be our youngsters, our military, our community courses, or whoever it might be. So I'm just kind of tweaking that constantly and making sure it's all running well. Like any good business, charity, organization, it should look like a swan skimming across the top of that loch or lake, but underneath there's always legs kicking, so we're making sure that each one's working the way it should be.
Cool. All right, Emma, tell us about you.
So I'm Emma Hutchinson. I'm the co-founder with my husband Jock and the CEO of the charity. So I run the equine side of it, but I also do the strategic and the sort of the fundraising, and the desk is just piled high with paperwork with all sorts of stuff that you have to have done to run a charity. But fundamentally, as I say, my passion has always been the horses, and I am still fascinated. We've just started running the programs again this year. We have a couple of months where we kind of try to get on top of all the paperwork and everything. And the last few weeks, we've gone back to running the courses. The horses have had a few months off, and they just amaze me about how it took them a couple of days to get back into it, but how they just slot back into it. They know their jobs, and they're just funny old things that, you know, some of them like some people and some of them don't like other people, and they know what they want and they know how to do their jobs. And it's just amazes me that they're just amazing at it.
All right, so Jay, I want to start with you. I remember when I was visiting you guys and we were doing various exercises together in the arena. It took me a while to realize that you had a prosthetic leg. You were moving on it so naturally, so athletically, and then at a certain point I say, oh, hold on a second, he's on a prosthetic leg in a sand arena, kind of jumping over poles and blocks and things.
Is that when he took it off?
I think he did take it off. No, I think he took it off so he could beat me over the head with it. But the injuries that you sustained, you were a Marine Commando. Tell us about your life prior to that, your
Okay.
life during the process of being injured, if you like, your recovery, how did horses come into this? Why did it make you feel that you wanted to do this as a calling, as a vocation, really?
So, yeah, okay, very quickly, I suppose. I was born in Greece. We came over to Wales, and I was brought up there. I spent a lot of time in North Wales, and there has always been a horsemanship connection in my family, normally with my grandfathers. So I agree with some people that say sometimes it can skip a generation. So maybe it hit me. I had an interest, whether I was trying to, pat one in a field or something, or asking, can I ride one? Can I ride one? So I did at an early age go for very basic riding lessons and going on to, trekking centres and things like that. And then I forgot about it completely. Went to college, studied engineering, always wanted to join the senior service, the Royal Navy. And one day I went to a careers fair and met this 6'4" big bloke with a green beret. And I said, who are you guys? And he said, well, we're part of the Royal Navy, but we're the elite soldiers of the Royal Navy with the Royal Marines Commandos. So I dug a little further, asked some questions. And I thought, yeah, that's me. I'm out playing rugby. I'm getting dragged down by the gamekeeper. I'm probably in a bit too much trouble at that early tentative age. And I thought, yeah, as soon as I finish studying, I'm going to go off and join the Royal Marines. And I did. At 19 years of age, I joined the 11th of September 2000, passed out an original. There's a high attrition rate in what's called the highest and hardest basic infantry training in the world to become a commando in the UK forces. And that's about 32 weeks long. So about 40 of us started, 11 of us, 7 to 11 of us, I can't remember the numbers, passed out original. That's without injury. That's without being back trooped or sent back a class. And I headed up to Scotland to 4-5 Commando, conducting some, guard duties, and basically went back from guard duties one evening to see planes flying into buildings. So I said to the guys in the room, I said, what film are we watching? They said, no, Jay, this is happening real time. This is a terrorist attack. And from there, that changed the whole landscape of combat for us. We were the original troops asked to go out to head into the hills. That's our specialization in 4-5 Commando, to go into the mountains and Arctic regions. So we were requested and off we headed. Subsequently, I did 3 tours. I was injured twice, once by a suicide bomber on my second tour. And I got fit, healed, recovered, led a team again on my third tour, and unfortunately stepped on an improvised explosive device that blew my left leg off below knee. So as an amputee in the armed forces, that's called a scratch, because it's not through knee or above knee. So that's maybe why I can maneuver a little better than the average person who's got higher amputation. I lost some digits to my right hand, nearly lost my right arm and right leg. But I think that the biggest problem for me was losing my identity, because I was looking down at the time. I was trying to get on the nets, onto the radio to call some things in. And I lost my facial identity. My face was blown off and degloved. So over the next few years, that was the 5th of November, of all dates, to play around with fireworks and bombs. It had to be the 5th of November. It took me about 6 years to get my, the surgery. I had about at least 11 surgeries to rebuild my face, from using bits of my forehead, rib, cartilage from my ears and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that took some time. And in that time, I needed something to occupy myself. I was a young guy, you're 27, 28 years of age. You've got a family, young family, but you've still got that adrenaline. You've still got those ghosts from being on previous tours, and you're worried about your future. But mostly you're trying to sort your head out whilst you're trying to sort your body out. You can't necessarily do that at the same time. So there is a time for each of those. I found out about HorseBack UK. I found there was a former Royal Marines officer and his wife, who was a police officer, working with horses up in the Highlands of Scotland. They approached the commando unit and said, well, maybe the guys want to try some horsemanship. At the end of the day, the horses have got 4 legs and I've got 1. I thought, well, that makes sense. There's a bit of mobility with dignity. And it's Western. So it's that kind of iconic cowboy imagery that it conjures up. And I thought, yeah, let's go take a look. And as soon as I got here, it was under my skin. I loved being around the horses. I loved especially riding the horses, but I found that there was more of a relationship working with the horses on the ground, that they were kind of flight animals. They wanted to run away very much like I did. I needed to find my herd. Horses need to be in a herd. So eventually I came back to mine, and that's me, 15 years now. So I've never left. They can't get rid of me.
Well, one of the things which I was really struck by when I was up with you all was it really did feel like a family. And obviously, Emma, it is a family. I mean, it's you, your husband, your daughters are involved. They're great horsewomen as well. So, like anything that's led from a family from the inside, this sort of brings a lot of love and functionality and multi-role, cross fertilization into the thing. But sometimes things that are very family run like that, it can feel that one's a little bit on the outside, from that core group. And it was very, very noticeable. I think, Jay, from what you're saying now, yeah, it makes a lot of sense that there's this, it was like sort of, clan headquarters, and you're sort of part of the clan and part of the family. And I could see how your horses as well responded in this way, that the horse herd and the human herd were unusually well integrated. And I was thinking, why is this? Is this partly because they're not less like a riding school where they all go off, back to their suburban lives? Or this is sort of up in Scotland, everyone's living there sort of to some degree in this slightly wilder place. Is it that? Is it, whatever it is, there's a special magic here. So, Jay, talk to us about this healing process of trying to find your identity. To lose your face, that's huge. And I think that's something which we can try to imagine it, but we can't imagine it. Talk to us about that process of that loss of identity and how that's informed the work that you do.
So bit of vanity there. So you're a Royal Marine Commando 1 minute. You think you're the steely-eyed dealer of death that heads out and does the nitty-gritty stuff that you used to see in war films and reading comic books. You look like your father. You think yourself rather handsome in your uniform, and the next thing, you have got a stick-on nose, a false eye, and you can't quite smile properly because the scarring and things like that. You don't want to look at yourself in the mirror because it reminds you every day. You kind of look into your partner and your wife and stuff and going, oh my God, this is not the person that you walk down the aisle with. You're walking down the street and you're worried that your nose is going to fall off at any moment. Different times of year. I was born in Greece, so I tan really easily. So I'd have to change from my winter nose to my summer nose, and then from my summer nose to my winter nose. You had to super glue it on when it was hot weather. I used to make a joke that I'd go for lunch with some pals, and if I sneezed, my eye would go into your salad, my nose would go into your pint, my leg would fall off. So the lads, being the lads, nicknamed me Mr. Potato Head at one point, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. So with that, working with the horses, they don't judge you. They judge how you are with them in that moment. They don't care about looks. They don't care about degrees. They don't care about the car that you drove up in or the motorbike you just hopped off, whatever it might be. They want to be with you in the moment. And that gave me that time to assess what I was going to do and think about my own behaviors and who I was becoming and who I wanted to become and who I had been. So, it could be a little bit forward, a little bit ambitious, a little bit strong, a little bit too full on. That doesn't work with a horse, but I can't be passive. I can't let them walk all over me because then they'll try and take charge. So again, it's trying to find that balance. And that for me is what I found. Riding, looking like a cowboy, heading out to the States and all the stuff that I did after, horseback archery, fantastic. But it was actually finding out who I was and where I kind of fit into this third. And it is leadership. I do believe that working with horses is leadership. You're going to use 5, 6 different styles, And that fascinated me. So the more I read, the more books I looked at, and Emma was constantly feeding me, read this, read that. Jock was saying, well, have you seen this YouTube documentary? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And I started to think, yeah, there is, I believe in what Winston Churchill said. There is something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man or a woman, obviously. But, you know, Winston Churchill, right or wrong, whatever politics, I felt of him as a very strong leader, a powerful man that suffered with the black dog when that darkness comes, when you suffer some of the kind of traumas that have been through your life and you try and comprehend what's happening. Working with a horse enabled me to do that and not clock watch. It wasn't being with a counsellor, say, right, you've got an hour with us, off you go, tell me how you're feeling. Can you watch a war film? Can you listen to music? What's your love life like? No, I wasn't interested in that, any of that. I just wanted to work with the horse on the ground and find out what made them tick, how you could train with them, how you could communicate with them. And people used to say, you know, do you go and see a therapist or a counsellor? And I said, yeah, I do. And I'll tell you how much to pay them. And they were like, oh, is it thousands? And I said, no, it's quite simple. It's hay and water. And that for me started that beautiful journey that I'm still on that trajectory, which is helping others.
When you're dealing with that loss of identity, it's obviously going to give you a lot of empathy. And I presume that a lot of the people that come to you as clients must be wrestling with similar dilemmas. Are you working with populations that have also been physically maimed in that way? And then also when you're dealing with, say, youth, at-risk youth or troubled youth who are going through identity crises in a different way, but of course have not yet seen the face of suffering in the way that you have. How do you walk that line between thinking, you know, you don't know what suffering is, you don't know what loss of identity is. I do. And also, yeah, but at the same time, everyone experiences it in their way. And just because they haven't experienced it in the way that you have, which is so raw and so extreme, doesn't mean, of course, that the way in which they're experiencing it is not driving them towards maybe some negative outcomes in their life. Talk to me about how you walk that dance and with helping others there, because what you've gone through, you could be forgiven for almost going down a bit of a bitter path and saying, well, you guys, no one can understand, you know, the extent of what I've gone through. And you'd be absolutely right. People couldn't. And at the same time, you can use this as an empathetic tool. Talk to me about that and talk to me about how the horses have helped you to make it a tool rather than a hindrance.
I think working with our military veterans, if we go into those first and I'll talk about the youngsters, it's a lot easier for me because if I wear shorts or you take a look at me, you sort of go, right, he's either been in a bad accident, and then you find out it's military and you go, all right, that must have been time in service. So it's like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we get
Right,
it.
there's a respect that comes with it.
The respect that comes to that because you can see
Yeah.
the scars of battle, etc.
Yes.
I totally empathise with the guys and girls that don't have the scars because they're internal.
Mm.
So as much as you have to deal with your physical trauma, along comes the mental trauma to try and adjust to your life. Try not to be bitter, be outward looking, and sort of try and find that resilience that you were instilled in the military, not to feel sorry for yourself, always look to the person to the left and right of you, always think about the team, and just think about there is no such thing as can't. You don't tell me I can't jump over those horse hurdles with you. I will do it. I might have to take a break, take my leg off, readjust it to run back again, but I'm still going to do it with you.
Yeah.
That's maybe the way I was brought up with a military kind of family and grounding. Definitely for the training I received, but also the way I like to lead my life. I like to remind our military community of who they are through the horses because they're resilient creatures. They don't feel sorry for themselves. And then with the youngsters is adding those layers and saying, yeah, this might happen to me. I'll tell you why. It's okay to ask a question.
Mm.
Point and gossip in the corner. If you want to know, I will be open and honest with you as I possibly can. Don't ask me about the question of how many times have I pulled the trigger and how many, all that sort of stuff. Those are questions you don't ask a serviceman. But if you want to know what pain I went through, how I dealt with it, what I felt about myself, I'll explain it, because we can talk about this. I hope it never happens to you in your life, but life is life. So things might have happened to you in the past, the way you've been brought up, the way you've been trapped. There may be trauma there, but let's try and build more layers to that onion to build a little bit of armor to you, a little bit of strength to you, some inner strength, whilst keeping that empathy and being able to still love life and love other people. And through the horses, you can do that with a youngster. If they can start to show empathy towards another creature, another being, then you're winning. And that assists the school, and that assists the counsellors, and that assists their growth.
Yeah. I should imagine too that because you do carry the scars of battle, it is got to help people who are much younger than that, looking out at their lives with some perspective to say, okay, wow, I see that this can happen. Okay, this has happened to this guy. And yet he's here in a position to help me. This must give quite a gift, I would think, to some of those kids who are already facing a certain amount of hopelessness, even if it's only perceived hopelessness. To them, it feels real. Do they ever say that to you? Do they say, yeah, being with you, looking at you, hearing about your experiences, this puts my world into perspective? What sort of feedback do you get?
I start off with, and we're getting a lot more girls through than we do boys at the moment, but it's always, I've got this problem, I've been pigeonholed with this, but they wouldn't say that. So they'll say things like, I've got ADHD and I'm medicated and I'm told I'm useless and I can't do anything and I'll never become anything. And I go, really? You've got a super power. You have got this ability to think at 100 miles an hour of 100 different problems and solutions and come up with them, whilst people are still just getting out of the seats to put the jacket on and go and deal with one of them. Now, we can sit here all day and talk about the issues and the problems, or we can go and find that light bulb moment for you. Because I've got ADHD, so's this team member, so's that team member. In fact, they've got a bit of this and a bit of that. So let's go and be those adventurers. Let's go and find what it is that really makes us tick. And we can do that through working with the horses on the ground, and then up to the level of where they'll be able to sit on them, if that's depending on the course and what we're doing. Does my experiences make a difference? Yeah, possibly, because it's visual.
Mm.
It's that ability to say to a youngster, yeah, this happens, but it doesn't define you. It can just make you stronger.
Mm.
And I want you to be able to push forward. So the feedback that I get might not be in the first day, probably isn't, might be midweek, it might be into the second phase of the second week, it might be into the 12th week of the youth development program. Someone takes me to time to go, do you know what, I've always wanted to ask you this question. Or it could be 3, 4, 5 years later, where I had this, where I met a youngster, he served me coffee at all places. I decided to try and take up golf and stuff. So I was at the driving range with my youngest daughter, and this tall lad came up to me. He wasn't tall when I first met him. He was the smallest of the group. And he said, how you doing, Jay? You good? Oh, it's great to see you. And it was on the tip of my tongue. And I was, yeah, I knew I'd worked with him. I remembered which group, but I couldn't remember his name. And I was, yeah, mate, I'm doing well. What are you up to? Oh, well, I'm working here. And he got called away after dropping off the coffees and cakes and stuff. And I went back and I said, Liam, how you doing? Good to see you. How you doing, buddy? And he said, I'm doing well. I've got this job, I've got another job, and I'm working jobs at the weekend. I'm going to go and study psychology in Edinburgh, but I'm going to take a year out and I'm going to go and travel around South America. And I went, oh my goodness, you were what was described to me as a youngster who was disengaged from the education system. I was called something else. It was a lot ruder when I was in school. I was called. But I shook his hand. I gave him a tip. I said, I'm so proud of you. absolutely brilliant. That's a success story. That's amazing. And he said, I want to study psychology because I want to be able to help people like you, Jay. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counsellor. I'm just someone trying to do something good, and have found horses is the great way of doing that. But I inspired a youngster to go into that world. And yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll be honest. Yeah, someone was peeling onions there, and it got a bit smoky as I left. And I was kind of, yeah, see you later, Liam. Yeah, all right, mate. Great. I hear a lot of success stories. You're not going to hit it on point every time. And you just can't help them. Some go along a different track, they take a different route. But when I hear stories like that, I know I'm doing something right. I know that we're doing something right, and I know the horses are working, because it just gives people that ability to think outside the box when you're doing equine assisted services.
When you say to them, let's go on an adventure, talk us through what some of those adventures look like. And you also said that some of the work can be mounted, which I love, because as you know, with Horse Boy Method, we do a lot of mounted work, but within the equine assisted world, it's often not mounted. So I'm intrigued by that. Talk us through what these adventures might be and just talk us through it.
So some of the basic ones are actually being out in the fresh air, realizing you're outdoors, looking at nature, starting to look at the world around you and being aware of it, being able to touch it, feel it, get amongst it, be within it alongside the horse, and noticing subtle little things like behaviors, like eye contact, that pressure that can come from eye contact, that ability to communicate without speaking. How do we do that? How do we pick up on the energy of each other? We're running a course at the moment. There's a young girl, she gets quite angry about things as she gets confused with stuff. And today I said to her, look, I can feel the anger coming off you. I can feel your frustration. What's going on? And she told me, and I said, do you feel that with a horse when you get frustrated? Because a horse can pick that up from you. I didn't realize I gave that off. And I said, to some people, you do. You give that off. It's not folding your arms and sulking. It's just this energy you give off, and the horse should pick up on that. So that starts with that kind of a little adventure. But talking about ourselves, which one of the horses are we? Anne is really good at pairing you up with your personality to, I don't know, what would you call it? Your horseonality. It needs to be opposite, or are they the same? Sometimes they can be opposite in their characters and on the spectrum of who they are. But then also we've seen horses that just join with someone who's maybe on the autistic spectrum, and the horse just goes to them, and all of a sudden they're partnered up. And we've seen that twice this week, of horses we didn't think would want to work anywhere near some of these kids, and they were like, no, we love them. This is who we want. We love them. So that's an adventure. Yes, I can take them out with the horses. We can go and do bushcraft. We can ride out. We can do camp outs and things. Just it's almost like you said to us, Rupert, that you follow the kid and go with them and take the horse, because that's the kind of conduit. That's the bridge a lot of times. So we have lesson plans. We have learning outcomes, objectives, qualifications, all that sort of stuff. But sometimes, and we had it this week and we had it today, do you know what? Changed. What we were going to do today is going to happen tomorrow, or it's going to happen Friday. Today, we're doing this. We're changing it. We're turning it, completely upside down. We tell them, we explain that to them. You see a sigh of relief, and they go, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do today. Again, you're picking up on that energy from the youngster, you're picking up that energy from the horse, and you're mixing it together and going, right, let's get the best outcome. So whatever adventure it is, use your imagination. Go out there, have fun, try different things. And that's exactly the conversation we had when you came up to visit us. And I went, yeah, I get this guy. I totally understand it. That's the way I am.
When people think of equine assisted world, I think they often think about people working in arenas in a very kind of fairly controlled sort of a way. You're out there. You've got a lovely indoor arena. You've got lovely round pen and outside arenas too. But you also have the forest and the open hill. And not every equine assisted place, of course, has that kind of access. But there are some I've seen that don't quite use it, and I'm always like, oh man, but that's kind of where the magic is. It's out there in nature. You mentioned going out and even camping out with horses. Paint a picture for us about how that can look. How might you organize that? What kind of people might you take on that, and how might that play out?
So we've changed various different programs and courses over the years, and we have one that is a personal development 3-phase program. So each phase being a week long, and it's residential, and that culminates in a final exercise where we take the horses out into, the Highlands of Scotland. We used to ride them out, and then we camp out. We had the horses out. Depending on the time of year, you can have problems with kind of, midges, and mozzies and all sorts of stuff. So we've got to be careful with that. Or we can bring the horses back in from that and leave our guys out on the ground. So now I think looking at the kind of well-being courses that we're doing is actually walking out to get the horse, spending time out in the field, looking at herd behavior, which I talked to you about. She takes that part, and understanding who we are, where we sit in the herd, what type of horse are we, what type of personality have we got. At all times being outdoors, and the more outdoors we can be, the better. So sometimes it might be as simple as just standing outside and just, doing some breath work maybe alongside the horses, trying to mirror the horses, inhale and exhale with ourselves, trying to work out our heartbeat the same as them. Those are the kind of adventures slowly. If we want to expand on those, we can push them out a little bit more on other programs. We can make them more complex. And we, as I say, we are lucky here. We're in the Highlands of Scotland. We suffer some heavy winters. We're just coming out of kind of one now. I would say that was too heavy. But the spring's here. We're starting to get that energy. The horses are getting lively again. Yes, let's start having some adventures again. What that looks like depends on the group.
Right. You mentioned bushcraft. Of course, that's dear to my heart, having lived with hunters and gatherers, and I know very much the healing power of touching, sleeping, being, working with nature in that intimate way that our DNA wants, because that's who we are. We're organisms. Again, this isn't something that's often integrated into equine assisted stuff, so I'm intrigued by that. Talk to me about the bushcraft that you do, and some of the changes that you see with people with that.
The bushcraft is, again, getting us outdoors. It's something that we brought into the course many moons ago. Various experts, professionals coming in to help us with training and things like that. It keeps you, if you've got attention deficit hyperactive disorder, for instance, it is a fantastic way of doing so many different lessons and moving around in that classroom, because it is a classroom. And if it's underneath an old drops parachute with a fire going, and you're talking about how to build shelters, or you're talking about plan M in a survival situation, or if you're simply making string for bows and arrows out of nettles, to different forms of making a fire, you can switch and you can pick up on the energy of that group to go, okay, we're losing a bit here, let's put that to the side and let's move on to something else. Or maybe that particular group is into that particular lesson. Okay, I can take the group and I can split the group and mix it up a little bit. So there's so many dynamics to do in bushcraft, but it's earthy, it's salty, it's getting your hands dirty, it's being in nature, it's noticing things, it's learning things. It's not a classroom environment, yet it is the best classroom to be in.
What sort of changes have you seen? Everyone's got their stories. What stories spring to mind for you of transformations you've seen using bushcraft?
I think kind of attention to detail with them, picking up things, and actually when they start to notice things and they start to learn a little bit, how they then become the teacher to the others. And that is fascinating, because they're learning when they're starting to teach what they've learned to other people, which is ingrained in that kind of psyche with them. So yeah, I love it when a teacher or staff member comes up and they've been trying for ages to talk about biology and photosynthesis and you know, whatever it might be, how a tree grows and things, and how roots work and how fungi works, etc. And the biology teacher comes up that they've not maybe gelled with, and they've had a bit of abrasion, they've rubbed up against each other. All of a sudden, the youngster's sitting there going, and this is how this works, this is how that is, and this is called a so-and-so, and this is a birch tree, and this is an oak tree, and this is this. And the teacher's just kind of like going, that's amazing, because a few weeks ago, I was trying to get this to you. Now I've got somewhere to go. Now I can pass on that little bit of knowledge because we've got a commonality, we've got an interest together. And that has repaired so many relationships with working with these schools and organizations. I think that's just golden. That's ace.
Brilliant. I mean, it's I know this is what you do every day, but it's cutting edge work, and it's so much more rich and layered than simply going into an arena with a horse. Not that that's not a wonderful thing to do, but you guys take it to a level that I am unused to seeing, and it's extremely impressive, Jay. All right, I want to ask Emma some questions now. Emma, why did you start this whole thing in the first place? Like, you must be mad. Why would you? Why would anybody start an equine assisted thing, let alone in northern Scotland, where the weather is brutal? And
Sorry, mate. Are you all right?
yeah, so Jay has to leave right now, listeners. So if you've got any other questions for him, just email us and we'll pass them on and we'll get answers from you. Jay, thank you so much. It was an honor. All right. Cheers, man. Okay.
So the whole thing started, we moved to the property that we're at now 16 years ago. And the idea is that we would be here and we were going to breed quarter horses, and we were going to take people out in Western Saddles to the beautiful seaside hills. And that was the idea. And then we'd been here so we moved to this farm. It was quite run down, and moved here in the November. In the December, we had some friends come around, and quite a few of them had come back from Afghanistan at the time, and they were not in a good place, either physically or mentally. And we sat around a big bonfire, and then during the days, at the time I had a horse, Jock had a horse, and the girls had a couple of ponies. And these guys, we just interacted with the horses. We were just outside, and one of the guys said, "This is what we need to do. This is how guys need to decompress after they've been to war. This has been a real kind of breath of fresh air for me, and this is what I absolutely needed." So that was really the start of it. And of course, we thought, I'm quite enthusiastic about things. Jock's extremely enthusiastic about most things. And we just said, right, well, we're going to do something. And it was 2008. It was the height of Afghanistan. And it was when we were all watching the news and seeing the coffins come back. And it was a pretty horrific time. So Jock approached 4-5 Commando, which is in our Broth, just over the hill, about an hour and a half away, and went to the CO there and said, look, we've got this property. We've got some horses. We've got a bit of a rundown farm. Would the guys who have been injured like to come and spend some time there? So the CO sent their injured troops. So there was a
CO being commanding officer for those who are not British, right? Yeah.
Or sent their injured troop, which is called a hardened troop, and there must have been probably about 20 guys came up for the day, of which Jay was one of them.
Okay.
And these guys they were all young, they all had life-changing injuries. So you're talking, so Jay had one leg, we had a triple amputee, we had, an 18-year-old. It was life-changing for us to see it, to actually to be there and hands-on with these guys and hear the stories. We both felt that we had to do something. We didn't know what it was that we wanted to do or what we could do, but we knew that we wanted to do something. So we are in Aberdeenshire. We have Aberdeen City, about 30 miles away. Obviously, Aberdeen is the oil place of the UK. And so we went and approached some of the oil companies and said, look, would you like to be involved in this project? And of course, they said, well, what project? You don't have a project. So we had to then go through the process of saying, well, what is it we're trying to do? How are we going to do this? And that's how we started to set the charity up. We didn't mean to do it. We fell into it. And it just evolved from that, really. And as I say, then Jay came up with several of the other guys, and it has just evolved. And we got more horses and we got more people, and then more people got involved. And once you get onto that roller coaster, there was no getting off, really. And I mean, my children at the time were 3, 5, and 7 or something. So they were involved right from the start. We had no facilities outside. So the kitchen was our kitchen, the toilet was our toilet, the fridge was our fridge. The kids' lunch and dinner frequently went missing because it was eaten by the course attendees. And so it was quite challenging to start with. But we eventually managed to get some traction. Some people heard about what we were doing. The British military at the time crawled all over us because we were looking after their injured, still serving guys. So we had to, every risk assessment, everything was just, how are you doing this? How are you looking after them? You better make sure that you're not damaging them further. And there had been some incidents in other places where people had been on horses and fallen off and, been more damaged. So, yeah, everything was really put into place with policies and procedures, and massively sort of overkill to make sure that we protected these guys. And so we were one of the only places where serving injured guys were being sent for.
Well, that was going to be my question when you said that Jay and the others who came up, had these life-changing injuries. And I assumed, clearly wrongly, that when you had injuries like that, you would be automatically discharged. Yet you say they were still serving. So what capacities were they serving in? And was the idea that they would then stay in the military or transition out of it? Talk us through, because I'm not familiar with that sort of infrastructure at all. We work with a lot of veterans, obviously, in our organization, but by the time we meet them, they're veterans, or we meet with people who are still serving, like we work with the German army, but they're not necessarily injured, and so they're sort of in between deployments. So that seems to me a really interesting grey area. If someone has a life-changing injury but is still serving, how does that look? Where would you guys fit in with that, with your service?
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
So at the time, so again, we're going back to 2008, 2009, these guys, it was unknown. Nobody really knew what was happening. All they knew that they were sending more guys out and more guys were coming back with these horrific injuries. So at the time, Jay was told, don't worry, we'll look after you. You'll always have a job. Don't worry about it. Because of course they didn't want to pile any further stress. They've all had these, a lot of these guys thought they were career military guys. They were going to be in the military for their career. And suddenly this career has been cut short. They didn't know what they were going to do. How are they going to finance their families and all this sort of stuff? So the military said, don't worry, we will keep you in. The reality of that was two or 3 years down the line, that's not going to happen. So they were told, well, you do have to transition out. There were various sort of funds available, transition funds to help the guys, but ultimately the ones who were no longer physically able to do their job had to leave the military. So it was a big change because, as I say, I think a lot of these guys were left very angry. It wasn't a decision that they had made. They didn't want to leave the military, and they were forced to. And as it stands now, we still work with serving military guys, and there are kind of recovery officers within regiments and stuff. So if somebody either has a physical injury or more often now is suffering from sort of mental health issues, then they have recovery officers within those departments, and they will work with them. And those recovery officers are quite good now at looking out with and pointing serving personnel to programs like ourselves, or there's some sailing programs, or there's yoga retreats, so they have got, over the last 15 years, got so much better about using these more holistic wellbeing programs for them.
But you're dealing with people who are, as you say, in this transition. Obviously, you are dealing with serving military as well. But when people are in this situation where a change is being forced upon them, and they're wondering, like Jay was, what's going to be my place in the world? Now, Jay was lucky, of course, that he knew that when he met you all, that was going to be a vocational step for him. Do you get other military who then want to come and work with you? Have you then added them to your team? And what do you obviously you can't do that with everyone. So what do you guys do in terms of helping people to look to the next stages?
I think so when the guys who are serving come to us, they are either transitioning out or they are trying to get themselves well enough to stay in. Now, a lot of them will come here thinking that they want to stay in because that's all they know, and they're terrified of going out into the civilian world. And then when they come here and they meet some of the staff, hear some of the stories, meet our mentors, because we have mentors on our military programs that have been through the whole process themselves. And we just kind of talk about these guys. They've all got amazing transferable skills that they don't understand. They don't realize what they're capable, what they've learned. Some of the submariners, for example, are crazy what they, engineering-wise, they know, and yet they think, oh, but how am I going to get a job in the outside world? Well, of course you are. You're highly intelligent, super talented, got all these qualifications. Of course you're going to get a job. You just have to have that confidence to go out there and sell yourself. And that's what these guys are not good at. They don't. The ones coming to us, generally, it's confidence, it's self-esteem, it's those kind of issues that they just need to be. We kind of say that coming here is a reset button. And if by coming to us for a week just allows them to put their life on hold and stop everything that is spiraling out of control, the fact that they are in a recovery program, that they have been flagged up by a recovery officer, that people do know that they've got mental health issues and they're still serving, that in itself is a whole kind of issue. So come here, press that stop button, and don't think about that. Just be with these other people who are going through the same thing. Everybody, again, you kind of sit around the table, and as Jay sort of touched on with the physical injury, it's very easy for people to say, oh, I understand why you're here, because you're missing an arm or you're missing a leg or whatever it is. But when they sit around the table and say, I don't know, I don't know if I'm allowed to be here because I've just got PTSD or I've only got this. And within 24 hours, they stay at a house, because our military program is a residential program. They stay at the house, and they part of the whole thing is that they have to cook meals together. And they have to say, right, who's going to cook? Who's going to do the dishes? Who's going to clean up? And these conversations are led by our mentors. And they just start to find out, well, actually, I'm here because this has happened to me. Oh, funny enough, same thing, something similar has happened to that person over there. And so they just are able to then breathe, because it's, for some reason, they can't talk to families and friends about it. Military, they're a funny old bunch. They yes, they keep together, they keep closed up, but they can talk to each other about stuff that they can't us civilians and outsiders. So the military programs is residential because they come from the whole of the UK. So it had to be residential. It includes the horses, which they do in the morning. It includes the other things, so the bushcraft, the photography, the breathwork, the archery, the Pilates. It includes all of those other activities that we do in the afternoon, because we had to do something in the afternoon because they can't work with the horses all day. And they can't go home because they've come from Devon or whatever. So that's why we started off doing these other activities. And then what we found is that, in actual fact, somebody does Pilates for the first time and then says, my goodness, I'm going to do this when I go home. So you've given them something that they can then take home, because we can't give them a horse to take home, but they can take the breathwork or the archery or whatever it is and go, actually, I'm going to go and try and do that. So that is a massive part. And then, as I say, the huge bit that goes on is this evening, sitting around the campfire, talking to each other, cooking food together, opening up, having the conversations and laughing. And the difference between when these people arrive on the Monday with their kind of shoulders down and their no eye contact, and then by Wednesday, the shoulders have started to lift, you start to get the eye contact, and then the whole yard turns into this guffawing and swearing and banter, and, the competitions between the army guys and the Marines and the Navy, and difference between the tri-services and things like that. It's just phenomenal. But as I say, it's a combination of all of the stuff that goes into this course that works.
I'm intrigued that you use photography. How did that evolve? And what do you observe that giving?
If I'm honest, we were just looking for another activity. And we happened to have somebody that was very good at photography. And we've all got these phones.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. And they've all got these amazing cameras in them. And nobody knows. You take a photograph, nobody edits them or does anything. I was completely unaware of all the things that I've got on my phone that I can do to improve the photographs. And so we literally had somebody come and teach us, our staff, and run some sessions with the courses. And it was an absolute game changer. And some of the photographs that the kids take, it's phenomenal. So it was something that we just fell into, but has actually become quite a popular other activity.
Well, the reason why that really intrigues me, and as you know, like with movement method, we have that, as well as horseback method and techine. So we're always saying, don't just do horse stuff. It's not enough. You've got to, as you say, send people home with other things. The photography that you're talking about intrigues me, because I can see how that's hunting. It's stealth and capture. It's also perspective taking. You have to look from outside the situation into the situation. It's also changing the situation, because you can take an image, and that image can also be emotional and internal, right? And then you can rewrite it. You can say, well, actually, no, I think I'd like to edit that outcome. And I think there's a subliminal message that can come with that, which is to say, you can actually re-edit your past. You don't have to say, this is my story, if it's no longer serving you or if it's too painful. You can work with that story, and you can rewrite that story, and you can affect that story, and you can turn out 25 versions of that story with, through different filters, all of which serve different purposes. And I could see how, even if you didn't make it explicit in the language when you were talking through the photography skills, how that could come across. So when you said photography, my ears pricked up. I was like, ooh, I think I've got to nick that for our program. Thanks, Emma, because it's
really simple, because you just go to wherever, and we take them into the woods, or we take them down to the stream or something, and just say, well, what do you see? And everybody sees different things. And you'll get, some of them will be lying on the ground taking a photograph of a stone or a leaf. Somebody else is reaching up as tall as they can to take things in the trees, or somebody's seen a rabbit or a stone or whatever it is. Everybody sees the same thing differently. So you come back with all these amazing photographs from literally just standing in a small area.
Have you collected some of these photographs together? Do you publish any of them or exhibit any of them?
Our to-do thing, we keep saying we must do it. We have got some great photos. And
I want to go to that exhibition. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we must do that actually.
You know, I was thinking you could even make that in your arena, like a constantly changing art exhibition.
Yeah.
You know, of like every few months you perhaps change it, and then you could publish and sell those images of transition. I love it. Note to self: have this conversation further with Emma, and let's see what we can come up with. It's so inventive what you're doing. I love it. Okay, so you don't, of course, just work with military. You've pivoted to schools, you've pivoted to adult mental health and that sort of thing. What precipitated that change? Because I know quite a lot of programs that are veterans programs or first responders programs that really stick very much with that population, because it is a fairly specific set of experiences that have brought those people there. Again, I was really intrigued when I ran across your programs, like, but hold on, they're doing all these other things too. How did that evolve?
So we started with the military for the reasons that I've spoken about. We are a charity. We have to bring in funds. And around about those times when we started, there was funding for military programs because everybody felt this affinity with what the guys were going through. About 5 years into it, we were talking to one of the guys from the lead military charities, and he said, you have to get all of your eggs out of this basket, because this pot of funding that there is at the moment is not going to be there forever. And it will disappear quickly. So you need to have some plans in place. And coincidentally, at the same time as this happened, we were approached by the headmaster of one of the secondary schools up here, who said, I have got a group of 15-year-old boys and we don't know what to do with them. They are just absolutely out of control. We don't know what to do with them. Can we send them up to you? So I kind of did that and whatever. And of course, the boys said, absolutely, send them here. So we had this group of boys, and they were fundamentally lacking some sort of alpha male input into their lives, really. And one thing we do have here is quite a lot of alpha male energy.
Yes, you do. I've been up there.
Yeah. So
which is unusual in a therapeutic riding equine assisted, unit, because normally it's 95% female.
Yeah. So they sent these guys up here, and again, it was absolutely transformational. The boys were given some boundaries, given some rules. They were given some consequences if they reacted or didn't do what they were asked to do in a very, polite way or whatever. They were told to run around the arena 3 times, and they soon. It sounds like terrible boot camp, doesn't it? But it was just, they hadn't experienced anything like that before. And after a few hours, they loved it. They loved that kind of release of energy. When we work with the schools groups, the first hour that we do with the schools groups is not in a classroom. It's not with the horses. It's basically dependent on the weather. If it's raining, it's in the indoor arena. If it's not, it's in the outdoor arena. And we build obstacle courses and we play around it. So for the first hour that they're here, the phones go into a box, they're taken away. And these kids literally, they have to move because, again, children are not active enough.
Yeah, I agree.
And they'll moan and groan and whatever. But again, by day 2, they're absolutely loving it. And you find out all sorts of things about somebody who's actually really accurate with a rounded bat, and somebody else can catch really well, and somebody else can run really fast. And, yeah.
When you say that the lads, your ex-military team, and I'd like you to talk to us a bit more about who your team are. Obviously, we've met Jay, but I've met some of your other team too, and I think it would be helpful for listeners if you could introduce them. When they said, okay, go run around the arena 3 times, of course, some teenage boys might say, well, F you. And then, of course, it's not the military, so you can't actually follow up with any physical consequences. So what did you just find that simply taking that approach was accepted by those boys because there was actually this sort of need for it, and the boys themselves somewhere from within knew that they needed that? Or because that's a risk to take, isn't it, to say, okay, here's the consequence, run around the arena 3 times or give me 20 press ups or something, and then the person says, well, no, I'm not going to do that, and then you haven't really got much to follow it up with. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting risk to take. Yeah, so just talk to us a little bit about that.
This is where Jay is an expert. I have fallen to this a couple of times where I have sort of said, there was one incident when we had, again, a particularly difficult group of teenagers here, and we were all sat around you've got a kind of fire pit kind of thing with a parachute over the top. We sat there having a chat in the morning, and this kid was just constantly talking and on his phone. And I said, I'd really like you to move, because I'd like you to move over there so that you're not next to. And he looked at me, and he looked at me, and he looked at me, and I thought, oh no, this is going to go horribly wrong. He's not going to move. And about 20, sort of 30 seconds, we had this sort of eye contact. And then my heart was going. And then he suddenly stood up and he moved and he went and sat down. And my heart kind of went down and I relaxed and thought, I've got away with that. But I came back to Jay and said, oh, this happened. And he said, Emma, never do that without a plan B. And I said, well, what would plan B have been? He said, you'd have left him sitting there and you move everybody else. So Jay has these plans when he's working with the kids, because he's generally the one that works with them in that environment, where if somebody doesn't want to do something, well, everybody else will move somewhere else. And then that person is where they are, but now they're not with all their friends in their little gang, because their friends in their little gang have moved somewhere else. So then they want to be where you want to be. So they're going to do what you ask them to do. So it's not by force or anything like that. It's by not mind games even. It's just clever skills that I don't know where he got them from, but yeah, he's got these things all in his little toolbox that he can manage to assess any situation and get these kids to do this without realizing that they're doing it.
So interesting to me. Okay, talk to us a little bit about the other members of the team. Now, I met Taff, for example, when I came up. I met Jock. Jock wasn't as around as I would have liked. So I didn't get a lot of time with him when I was with you, but I could see, extremely, extremely charismatic man with bringing his own ex-military experience. Just talk us through a little bit the team you've got, because it really is unusual to find such a male presence in an equine assisted team.
So Jock, my husband, so he basically was a Royal Marine Commando and a helicopter pilot in the military for 10 years. So he also had had a passion for horses since he was a child. He has ADHD. He can't sit still for more than 15 minutes. That's on a good day. He is absolutely passionate about this type of work, about helping people. He's been through his own kind of mental health issues, and so feels real empathy for those that are going through it. And his huge skill is being able to connect with people on that first, they come up the drive and you've got him in his cowboy hat and his chaps and his horse kind of saying, hi, come with me and I'll just talk to you about me and my horse and the relationship that we have. And he's able to, within that 45 minutes to an hour, be able to get somebody to say, wow, this is a place that I want to come to. I understand that I too could have a relationship with a horse and with another person, and that I want to start my life again. And he's able to do it very annoyingly with anybody who comes here, whether it's very young kids, whether it's autistic kids, whether it's military guys, whether it's WI ladies, whether they come and they just think that Jock is the best thing since sliced bread. He then hands them over to us, and it's almost like his bit, his kind of showmanship, which is his main kind of role, is done. And then we kind of wheel him in and wheel him out as and when he's needed, because he's amazing for these other things. But again, the energy with Jock can be quite high because that's what he is. So as I say, we have to wheel him in and then wheel him back. But again, he does all the PR stuff and the marketing stuff and things like that. And he's a very good ideas person. So he'll come up with these, what about this? Why don't we speak to these people? What about this? What about, and most of the ideas you say, no, But every now and then there's one that you go, actually, if we put a bit of thought into that, we could work with that. So that's him. We then have Tass, who runs it was the Prince's Trust program. It's now the King's Trust. So that's our 12-week youth development program, where it's for 16 to 25-year-olds, and they come here for 12 solid weeks. And throughout that time, they work with the horses. They do all the other activities that I've already mentioned. They have a week where they go out and do adventurous activities. So we hire e-bikes for them, and we make them e-bike up some hills and things like that. They do river walks. They do a camp out, which bizarrely, bearing in mind that we live in Aberdeenshire, a lot of these kids have never stayed away from home, or let alone camped out. So it's a huge deal for a lot of these kids to go away on this. And this is a residential week. The part of the 12 weeks is a residential program. They do work experience. They do, what else are they doing that? A community project. So one of the community projects was they went around one of the local estates and they cleaned all of these old 100-year-old well rest and be thankful things. So when the old drovers used to bring the cattle and the sheep along, they have these rest and be thankful water things. So they cleaned all those for a community project. They cleaned a load of tracks. So it's an amazing project that they do. Tass is retired officially from the military. He's in his early 60s. He was in the military for 40 odd years.
What did he do?
He was in the Pioneers. So he was in as a non-commissioned officer to start with, and then worked his way to become an officer, and then ended up.
Talk to us about who the Pioneers are, because that's quite an interesting branch of the British military, which I think a lot of American listeners and so on would not be familiar with.
I think I'm not a great expert on this, but they basically build things. So if you go somewhere and you need a bridge built or something, whatever, the Pioneers are the people that go in with the expertise to build the bridge to get the tanks over.
Right.
So really charismatic guy. The last few years that he was in, he worked at the OTC, which is the young officers in the university. So working with young people again. And he now runs this program, and he's absolutely amazing at it.
Yeah.
So you have Taff, you have Joanne, who's our admin lady, who again is married to an ex-Navy pilot. So again, you've got the Navy connection there. And then you have my daughter Charlotte, who, horsey through and through. She's done a psychology degree, so she's interested in all that side of it. And then we've got Georgia, who is one of our school leavers. So she came on one of our school programs about 4 years ago. She then came here on work experience, and she's now employed as a yard person. And she's amazing. And then we've got some guys down south who, again, more ex-military guys, who, when we're running programs elsewhere, or they'll come up and be involved in the program.
Are these the people that you refer to as your mentors?
No, so that's our kind of southern team.
Okay.
The mentors are basically people who have been through the program, and then we have recognized certain skills with them and thought, that's somebody that will be amazing as a mentor for other people. So we then put them on a mentors, an additional program that Jay's put together. And they come up here and they're given, things about boundaries and sort of additional skills to help.
And these would be people who transitioned out of the military exactly as we were talking about earlier, gone through that identity crisis, and then have come out on the other side of it and have created careers and lives in the civilian world.
So they have all been through huge, huge processes themselves. So they have got the empathy, but as you say, they would all quite happily admit that they're still on their journeys. I think we're all on some sort of journey, but they will quite happily say, well, some of them are working, others are not working. We've got John, who is 79. He's an ex-Royal Marine. He is the fittest 79-year-old you will ever see, and he's amazing. And he said this is what keeps him going, because he comes up here to this 4 or 5 times a year, and he's just brilliant. So they're kind of like, mum and dad of the house, dependent on age.
But that's such a clever way to organize, because I think a lot of organizations like ours, the manpower thing is massively tricky, because it's humans are expensive and also entirely necessary. and then you don't always have so much work for the whole team. So to have these people that, are adjunct, that come in and come out, who've also graduated through your program, I think there's actually a lot that a lot of listeners could learn from with that, because one of the, as you can imagine, I go around doing a lot of trainings, and one of the things I hear regularly is, I haven't got the capacity, the human capacity, for the amount of work I need to do or that is coming in, and I can't yet fundraise for all those full-time salaries, and I can't necessarily hire those full-time salaries until I know that those people are able to fully integrate into this program, because and then they might be out on a limb geographically like you are, so that the equivalent in the USA, they might be in the mountains of Colorado, or they might be some of the places we have in Ireland, and there's a difficulty because people then have to relocate from somewhere else to do that job, and then you're taking a big risk, you're taking a punt on that person, and if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, so much has been invested, and they have had to do so many life changes to get themselves up to northern Scotland, or and find a job, find a place to live, and if it doesn't work out. But so your idea of people coming in and out in this sort of mentor role, and also of having a sort of team that's down south where the big populations are, that can then seasonally, if you like, bring people to and fro. I think that's really inventive, and you might underestimate yourselves a little bit there. I think there's a lot that many of us running these programs could learn from you in how you organize that. How did you come up with that concept? Because it's quite original.
Because of the vulnerability of the military guys, and because they were still serving, we were basically taking a group of guys, putting them into a house. And I am Mrs. Health and Safety. I'd had real concerns about, a lot of these guys mentally were just fragile, and I wasn't happy about putting them in a house without some sort of supervision. So initially, when we started, we would have a member of staff stay in the house with them, and it just didn't work, because they felt that they were being watched constantly, and tales been told and all this sort of stuff. And so again, we just got some great people who came on the courses early on, and just said, look, how do you feel about if we're always there at the end of the phone. So if something happens, then we're at the end of the phone. How do you feel about going in as the person who meets and greets? So the mentor's always there, because our program runs on a Monday morning, but everybody flies up, drives whatever it is on the Sunday. So they have that first awful night in the house where they don't know anybody. They don't know what they're going to do, because they've got this vague sort of story of what horseback does, but they still don't really know what they're coming to. They might be hundreds of miles away from home. They're extremely anxious, and they're met by one of our mentors who say, hi, it's great to see you. I've made some lasagna. I've got chili on the whatever. They have these group chats beforehand. So they already start to get to know each other and interact. And has anybody got any dietary requirements? Have you got any favorite recipes? Do you need to bring a soft pillow, or any of these kind of things to make them start to feel a little bit comfortable? Are you Army, or are you Navy? Are you the same regiment as me, or whatever? And then the mentor meets them on the door and says, look, mate, I've been where you were. I was anxious. I was the one who didn't want to go up the drive, who didn't want to get out of the car, who was terrified to come here and nearly didn't get on the plane. But you've made it here. That's the first step. Come on in. And the thing is, again, about the military, dependent on which army you were in, you call a cup of tea a wet or something else. There's this camaraderie that they instantly have, that, I was in the, I don't know, I get very confused by it all. So they have this instant.
Yeah, they'll have their private languages, tribal languages.
And they always know somebody who knows somebody whose dad knew somebody. It's absolutely nuts that everybody on every single course has always got somebody who's known somebody who's known somebody, kind of thing. So by the time they come to us on that Monday morning, they go off and get a cup of tea in the kitchen. We bring the mentors in and say, right, how was it? And they've already sussed everybody out. And they can say, he needs to be a bit quiet. We need to just bring him forward. And that helps me, because I very quickly have to allocate the horses for that first day from quite a limited knowledge, because again, the knowledge that you get on the phone, the application forms is irrelevant really. So it is that the feedback that I get from the mentors, and then literally just that first kind of bit around the table and having that first cup of tea. And that's it. It's amazing. Very rarely do I get it wrong with the horses, and we have to change them. You can generally suss people out because they're at their most vulnerable then, and then it's really apparent what they need. Even if they're trying to mask it, you can see, well, this is somebody who needs to be more confident and stand up and be more assertive. So I'm going to give them Polly, because Polly is a big old cob, and you know, if you're not assertive with her, she's going to drag you over the field to get the long bit of grass thing. So
do you feel that that's a system that you could train other equine assisted groups in how to identify, find, and deploy these mentors? Because I think this is something that sort of hasn't occurred to a lot of people.
Yeah, and we've got mentors. We have got a mentors course that Jay's put together, which is actually an SQA, Scottish Qualifications Authority qualification, or it can be. So they can come and get an actual qualification. But the thing is with them, we are really grateful to them, and we are really grateful to them because we couldn't run our military programs without them.
Right.
But they are also really grateful to us because they don't want to be away from it. They love coming to horseback. Horseback, they are part of the horseback family. We always kind of joke, you know, once you're here, you're never away from the family. You are part of this dysfunctional family. And so they love, and they are continuing their journey, and they feel they are giving something back. They are helping other people, and that's, you know, that's the sort of circle that we want to kind of be able to.
Do some of these mentors also come and help you on the non-military programs? So they help you with the troubled youth and the kids? And I think what we need to do is maybe after this podcast, maybe do a webinar for our members on New Trails Learning Systems, you know, who are all running programs. I think that people would be fascinated by this possibility that if you weren't connected to the military in the way that you guys are, you wouldn't know that there are these networks that you can tap into. And it might not occur to people who are in the military or transitioning out of the military that they could become mentors in programs like these unless they're, you know, so you guys really could serve as a bridge, I feel, between the more civilian end of equine assisted, which is most of it, and really solving a lot of these dilemmas which people have of not enough team members, but not enough money to hire people, you know, full time, and can't really rely on volunteers all the time because it's not fair, and B, if you not paying people, they sort of can't show up all the time, and that a lot of people get caught in that time in that particular dilemma. It seems like you guys have really found an amazing way through that. So with your permission, I think we'll ask you to come and do some consulting with that. You talk about allocating horses. Talk to me about the horses. Talk to me about how you train and prepare the horses. Talk to me about, you know, obviously there's how many horses have you got? How do you keep them? Talk me through the equine end.
So we're lucky we have plenty of space. We have a herd of 40 horses who, dietary requirements allowing, we've got a big, in the winter, we have fields around the house and the stables. So they live in smaller herds around in the winter because that's what has to happen. In the summer, we've got a 40-acre hill field, which pretty much most of the herd go out to. Certainly in the next 2 weeks, then it'll be up on the hill. The grass is just starting to grow now. And then we've got another 40-acre bit of what we call rough ground. So it is literally rough ground, all sorts of different types of grasses, gorse bushes, little bits of woodland and stuff. And I mean, you talked to Jay about the bushcraft. One of the best activities that we do with the kids is dependent on the time of the year. If the horses are out in the rough ground, it's kind of like, guys, you're going to have to go and find your horses, because you literally can lose these horses, and you can take half an hour sort of marching across this bit, going
just to locate them. Yeah.
And then you can locate it, but you can't get to it because there's a huge great gorse bush that you can't go through unless you've got the Highland pony that just literally goes straight through it. So, I mean, our thing is that they're kept as naturally as they possibly can be. Happy horses in that sort of environment make working with them, for them doing their job, very easy. It means that we don't have to worry about you know, whether this horse is going to kick that horse or whatever when we're working with them in more enclosed spaces, because they've dealt with all that in the fields. They all know the hierarchy and everything about, you know, don't go near that horse because it's mean, kind of thing. So they have all sorted that. The horses sort all that out. We have bred some of our own horses. So easy to just bring into the workplace and just start working them, because they start coming in as youngsters and just getting tied up with the rest of our herd. And people are always amazed when they come up here that we can have 20 horses. We've got the corral in the centre of our kind of steading. We tie the horses all up there. They don't get hay nets. They just get tied up and they just stand. And they'll stand there whilst they're groomed. They'll stand there all together. And our young horses learn how to stand because everybody else is standing, and that's what you do, sort of thing. So we start the youngsters coming in with the other horses, and then they'll just start to get groomed. We do a lot of groundwork with them, because part of the program that our guides do is simple things like backing the horse up or drawing the horse into you or being able to just move its back end around. So it's just very simple kind of horsemanship that we do. So all of our horses need to be able to do that to ensure that every individual that asks the horse to back up is going to get a win. So the horses are all kind of taught from a certain command and a noise, and the people who come on the courses are told, well, do this bit of pressure, ask with this noise, and the horse will back up. So the horses have to be trained to a certain standard to get that win. Probably 50% of them are ridden. So again, those are all started in halters. They're generally started bareback. Once you can walk, trot and canter bareback round in a halter, then we might decide to put a saddle on. So that, and again, they're just so used to being around each other. It's just a really simple process. So we do put saddles on them, but we ride in sidepulls. We don't ride in bridles. So again, we ride kind of like with the, if people are riding, then they'll ride with a kind of like a loosest rein. Because again, I've got this real strict phobia of kids in riding schools balancing on their hands and things like that. So we need to be as kind to the horses as we can. When they do ride, the first thing that we tend to do, we used to do a lot more of the, right, let's get you on, but actually now I've kind of changed a bit. And the first time that people will get on is actually bareback. So their first experience of riding a horse will be bareback, whether it's the kids or the adults, the military guys. Because again, it's just about that closeness. And again, it's not about riding a horse. It's about having that connection. It's about feeling the way that the horse is moving, and we'll get them to, you know, touch their toes or put their arm up or maybe close their eyes and just sort of say what they're feeling. Can they feel the way that the horse is moving the legs? So we're kind of doing that. So they are riding, but it's not about the riding. And then they get off and say, I want to do this again. I want to do more. So then we can do more, and then we might put the saddle on, we might not put a saddle on, we might do some obstacle courses, we might end up going for a trail ride around the rough ground. When we do that, you end up being followed by several Shetlands, which can be slightly intimidating sometimes. But as I say, we might take them off onto the trail where we bundle them all in the lorry, and they go for the big kind of trail ride, and then the guys camp out overnight. So as I say, the horses have all got things that they enjoy more. So we've got the horses that love being groomed. There's always some horses that are a bit nonplussed about being groomed. We've got horses that are fantastic at groundwork. We've got horses that are very good in the round pen. We do some liberty stuff in the round pen. So we've got some horses that are good at that. We've got others that love being ridden. We've got ones that can be ridden, but they don't particularly enjoy it. So we're able to, because we've got the space and the numbers, put the horses into the job that they are good at and love, which means they're better at the job that they do because they love it, kind of thing.
Right, and they're more generous when it comes to occasionally being asked to do a job. Well, okay, maybe that's not my favorite job, but all right, yeah. You also, though, you guys are accomplished riders in the sport world as well. You guys event. Your daughter's event and so on. So it's interesting that you cross, you know, it's I'm always intrigued by people that cross over between those worlds, because one of the, if you like, curses of the equestrian world is that I always feel people over specialize. It's like, I am only a natural horsemanship person, or I only do Western pleasure, or I am, a show jumper, but I'm not interested in that dressage stuff, or I'm only a dressage rider. It's like, why not do it all? I mean, horses presumably like variety in the same way that people do. So I was quite intrigued when I came to you to see that aspect. What do you feel that the involvement in eventing brings to the assisted program, and from an equine standpoint and from a human standpoint? Like, talk to me about that cross-fertilization. That also happens within your own family as well. So this makes for an interesting mosaic.
I mean, anybody who kind of connection with their
Mm.
partner, the horse, because otherwise, I mean, there are people who will do it. But I think, and I think in eventing as well, because it is so extreme.
Yeah, you have to trust the horse with your life.
You
Yeah.
have to have I mean, you cannot make a horse jump what these guys are jumping. The
No.
horse has to want to do it, and you're not going to get the right stride the whole time. So you are putting your trust in that horse to get the two of you over, and you have to give the horse the capacity to think. And I think that's what I always say is the difference personally that I feel between your more traditional English riding and your more sort of Western horsemanship, is that in the Western side, you tend to put a little bit more responsibility on the horse.
As someone that lived in Texas for over 20 years, I'd say you see exactly the same spectrum of bad and good in the Western world that you do in the English world. But yes, a good horseman does do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, what we've done is with the horses that we use to compete on, they're still used. They still benefit from all of the other stuff.
Fantastic.
That we do with the horses here.
And do they get involved in the program as well? Or is there like, oh no, you guys are the posh horses over there, and you guys are the rough horses over there, or do they all actually muck in together?
There is a bit of like, well, these are the posh horses over here, but when we're wanting to show what you can achieve with horses, now this is when you've got a sort of top level partnership. This is what you can achieve, and we've got one of the thoroughbreds who is very extreme, and it's taken a lot of work with her to sort of be able to teach her to bring her anxiety down, and sort of so we can use her to show this is a horse that was at the top of its game, was a kind of racehorse, is basically designed to run. This is long legs, she runs. She doesn't want to be made to stand still and do kind of little things. But we've taught her that actually it can be fun. So we do a lot of liberty stuff with her, and taught her to sort of come in at a whistle. And the kids love all that. If you can kind of have a horse sort of cantering around you in a circle in the field, and then you whistle and it kind of runs to you and sort of nuzzles in, the kids are like, wow, that's just amazing. And we've got some of the horses that are quite capable of doing that with these kids, and they just love it, just being followed around by the horses and whatever. But the reason that we've got so many is, as I say, so that we can fit the personalities with the individuals. We have got a herd of an aging herd, which again we bred some horses because we did think, well, by this time these horses will no longer be with us. We have got now quite a herd of sort of 28, 29, 30-year-olds who are still have come out this winter particularly well, and actually have been used on the program last week. They just come in, they get a groom, they love that. That's kind of where they're at the moment. And then we've got some little mini Shetlands, because we get big 6'6" Royal Marines who are terrified of horses, and literally terrified of horses. So you bring this thing that is the size of a Labrador out and say, you're having a laugh if you're telling me that you're frightened of that. And then they kind of say, okay, fair enough. And
While
then,
not disclosing to them that the most terrifying equine they will ever encounter is in fact a Shetland pony, but hey.
well, exactly. Yeah, they are the horrors. So we've got lots of different. We've got thoroughbreds, we've got cobs, we've got quarter horses, we've got Irish drafts. We've got a whole spectrum of horses. We've got horses that we've rescued. We've got things that we were given, whatever, and they've all kind of found their little place. But they're just. But as I say, it's fascinating how we had one horse last week with one of the military courses with a lady, and he's just funny. The horse Mikey, he's a funny little horse. He doesn't like many people. He's quite a loner. And I don't know why I made this match with this lady last week, but I thought, right, I'm going to put her with Mikey, and he just loved her. And it was just the match made in heaven. And I just thought, my goodness, this horse is just having a fantastic week. he was every day he was looking for, and he'd come in, and it was just amazing, just amazing. So they're funny critters. We had, again, we've got one big Irish draft horse who had a really autistic boy who came on one of the school's programs, and just, he didn't want to engage at all. And so we were out with all the other kids catching the horses, and he just stood, put his head down, and just whatever. And this big old Irish draft was not the horse I was going to put him with, but he clocked him from the other side of the field, and I just saw him kind of like coming, and he just literally came up and he put his head on this kid's shoulder.
Ah.
So they then spent the whole their school program. He then came back to us about 2 years later to do the youth development program, and bubbling up here just thinking about it. And this kid, having not been here for 2 years, went into the field, and exactly the same thing happened. This horse from a distance spied this child, who was then 19 years old, and literally went up to him and did the same thing. Now, how does that happen?
This is one of the things that I am constantly floored by, is just when I think I know something about horses, they do in this type of work that we do, the way that they'll show up making their own decisions, completely independent of us. I remember once one of my really good quarter horses, who could be aloof, we had a boy who drowned and was in a pretty vegetative state, and people said, well, can we bring him? I'm like, sure, but I don't know what, but sure. And this kid comes out, and he's in a wheelchair, and he's completely unresponsive, feeding tube. And my horse Clue just comes, like you just described, across the field and just sniffs him all over, and then licks him all over from head to toe.
And that's not something that horses do. That's just weird.
They don't. And it's not like he was my licking horse or something. No. And what ended up happening was the kid ended up riding him and indicating and responding. But what was going on in the sort of other dimensional consciousness that for example, with this autistic boy that you describe and your horse, something goes on in that field of consciousness that's outside of our perception. And I always think that's one of the things that keeps us in this, because it can be quite exhausting work, as you yourself know. And then you come across these situations relatively regularly, and it's like you're dancing with God. It's like
But people say to us, how does it work? And I just say, I don't know, but I don't need to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best. Just let it happen, because it does happen.
Now, really what we're talking about with the collective consciousness, in that, you can call it God, you can call it the Akashic record, you can call it, parallel consciousnesses, but really it seems to come down to love. And we've touched on the fact that you operate as an extended family, but you also operate as a close, tight family. What's it been like for you and your children to really grow up together? Because, as you know, kids make their parents grow up, whether the parents want to or not. You guys have grown up in this endeavor, as you said. When the lads were first coming out, it was your fridge, and they might eat the kids' lunch or dinner, and the kids sort of having to grow up sharing their space. I think it's very healthy. Talk to us about what it's like for you and for them to do this thing as a family.
So, I mean, the best was, Helena was 3 when we started this. And for the first few years, a lot of the guys who were coming to us had prosthetic legs. So in our kitchen, you would see literally these prosthetic legs all just leaning against the wall in the kitchen, and various other kind of limbs. So the girls just grew up, they thought that was normal. But Helena would always, as soon as somebody came up to the house, whether it was on a course or whether it was just somebody else, she just used to kick them in the shin. And it took us quite a while to say,
of course she did.
Behavior. She said, but it's not a real leg. I said, but that not everybody has metal legs. It's you can't just kick people in the shin. So she just thought that everybody had these kind of amazing legs that you could kind of kick. And again, Charlotte used to some of the courses, some of the prosthetics that they had feet. So, you know, I've got these visions of the girls with their, you know, they were 8 or 9 or something with their nail polish out, and they would be putting nail polish onto these prosthetic toes. Just, you know, and I think a lot of their friends, they just, because people can find things like that, disfigurement and disability and stuff, people can find it really difficult. They don't know how to deal with it, how to.
Yeah, it can trigger fear, basically.
How do I speak to? I mean, a really good friend of mine said, well, how do I speak to Jay when we first met him? And I said, what do you mean, how do you speak to Jay? Well, you know, Jay's got all this stuff that's gone on with him. I said, but speak to him like he's Jay.
Yeah.
And she said, okay. But people find barriers. So my kids had no barriers. Their friends had no barriers because it was just normal. They loved it until they got to about 12 or 13. Then they hated it. It was the worst thing when Dad used to go into school to give a presentation about the charity, or everybody would say, oh, what's happening at HorseBack? They hated it. And then that love has kind of come back, sort of 16, 17, suddenly they actually appreciate what we're doing here and see the differences and have got involved. And so that kind of passion and that love has come back. It's not easy working with family, and obviously Jock and I work together. We're very different. We have managed to carve out very different roles within the charity, which has kind of kept us able to work together. And as I say, Charlotte's kind of come in now, and she's the yard manager and the horse trainer and those stuff. So she's carved out her role there. It is difficult, but it is, as I say, I think they're now very proud of this. It's 16 years into it, and this kind of legacy that they are part of the HorseBack family, as are their friends. Actually, they're kind of proud of it now. But it's been a journey, I have to say.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
What's interesting, as you're talking, I'm just considering, you know, you've got a core equine team there, which is mother and daughters. You've got a core male team, which is, okay, now what are we going to do with these prepared horses? And obviously there's integration. It's not like everyone's confined to a role, but it makes me think very much of sort of a hunting and gathering community where you do have, to some degree, gender roles, but not because anyone's assigned them. Like, you can't hunt because you're a woman, or you can't gather because you're a man. Of course you can. And actually, there's a lot of cross-fertilization people do, but people find their roles by choice, so they have agency, and then they know how to weave that ecosystem together. And again, you know, as we know, the horse world is just female dominated anyway, except for in the professional end where you do get a bit more balance. But I often observe this, particularly working with autism, that you might get basically an all-female staff with an almost all-male clientele, autistic boys, and where's the male role models, leadership? Now, if you go to a place that's doing, say, special needs with surfing or mountain sports or something, the blokes are there.
Mm-hmm.
But we need them in the horse world, and in the equine programs, and you guys have really got that. And you've got the strong women in leadership roles as well. It's like the best of all worlds. And I do feel that you guys could and should be out there mentoring other equine programs saying, look, you got to kind of have this balance if you want to balance people's brains and nervous systems, because without it, it's weighted. So that was actually going to lead me into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. You guys have started this register, and I know that you're also running courses, and people can now come and train with you to some degree. And you've also got you're busy working stuff out with Hartpury College down, which is one of the big agricultural colleges in the
Mhm.
UK, for those listeners in the USA and elsewhere. Just the geography, it's think Alaska to Denver. It's like the top of the Highlands down to middle England. It's not round the corner, but it's a major educational establishment. So talk to us now about the register and your educational programs, and then also how can people get in touch with you for mentorship.
So Hartpury came about, I was down there 6-7 years ago, and we got the opportunity to run some pilot programs down there. Hartpury is the biggest equine university in the UK, and it's very traditional, and but they have some members of staff who are quite high up, who are quite innovative, and thought that it was a good idea for us to do some equine assisted services programs. So we went in.
But how? Because they're not exactly in your neighbourhood, are they? And so you'd have expected that to happen through a Scottish college or so. Hartpury is apples
It
to
just
oranges
happens
for
through
you.
personal relationships, basically.
Okay.
So they kind of invited us to run some programs, and we basically, you can see, I remember the first day that we went in, you could see the equine department there thinking, who are this bunch of weirdos who are saying, can we build an obstacle course, and can we do this, and can we just groom the horses in the arena and with the kids? We're thinking, well, why are they not? What is that for? Anyway, they, within literally 24 hours, they were all asking if they could volunteer to help. The equine director is just the most amazing guy. We've run some pilot schemes, we've run some additional programs, and we're now trying to, I'm going down in next month to see how do we work out, how do we fund this on a long-term basis? Because it needs to be sustainable. It needs to be something that isn't just a week here and a week there. It needs to be something where they want to bring equine assisted services to Hartpury so that it is a standalone department and running all sorts of programs for different groups, whether it's kids, whether it's military, whatever. So that's a work in progress, but it's really exciting because, as I say, it's an environment that it's amazing how many horse people still don't know about equine assisted services.
Exactly. And I think what's changing, particularly in the UK and Ireland, is that it used to be, RDA, and
Yeah.
RDA was volunteer, and therefore you didn't get paid. So you had to either be, you were usually a lady of a certain age who didn't need to work, so you were going to put your time into that, or someone who was really drawn to it and you were going to kind of work for nothing because you felt this calling. But things have changed now, and quite recently, it's now a career track, and it can be a decently paid career track. But this is all quite new, so you're right. A lot of people aren't aware of it, don't know about it, and they might be going into the equine industry thinking, well, I've got to go into the sport end, but that's already saturated with people and competition, and anyway, there's no security there, or like everything in sport, unless you float up to the very, very top, it's
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, talk to us about how
Yeah.
you guys are developing that, and looking for the funding for those sorts of programs. And again, also tell us about this register that you guys have put together and what that's for.
Yeah, how it sort of came about is, as I say, Hartpury were then looking to run an equine assisted program as a qualification, and then they realised that part of the program needs to be sending people out to do practical work, and actually they didn't know who they were going to be sending people out, students out
Right.
to. They didn't know if these people that they were going to be sending them out to were going to be any good. So they kind of pulled that back. And at the same time, myself and some other people had got together, because I was being constantly contacted saying, I want to do what you do. How do you do it? Where do you raise the money? Whatever. And I thought, this has taken years and years of us doing this. It's a really hard slog. But there are lots of people out there who are doing amazing jobs, but there's also lots of people who don't have the right insurance. Whether they know or they don't know, they possibly just don't know that they don't have the right insurance. There's a real thing within equine assisted services that you suddenly bring a horse into the environment and you've become an expert in a field that you've got no knowledge in, because you brought a horse in. So a group of us got together and formed this register, which is part of the Equine Assisted Services Partnership. Now, the aim of this...
What's the register called?
The register is called the Human Equine Interaction Register. It's called HEIR, HEIR, and that sits under this Equine Assisted Services Partnership. And basically, the idea behind that is that it's there to protect and promote providers, so service people that actually deliver, to protect the participants and to protect the horses as well. That's the main aims. So things like making sure that people have got the right insurance in place, that you stick to your scope of practice, that you are considering animal welfare, that you're not just doing this to earn a few extra buck on top of your riding school kind of thing that you're doing, whatever it is. So it's now got, I think, close on 100 different members that are from single people, members doing it, to organisations like ourselves. And we've got the second annual general meeting that's being held at Hartbury on the 8th of April. And again, it's about sharing information. It's about learning from each other. It's not about being modality specific. I don't care what model you use. As long as you're doing good work and you're being kind to the horses, you've got the right insurances in place and you're doing what you've got the skills to do. So if you're not a therapist, don't say that you're doing therapy, or don't try and do therapy. Leave that to the qualified.
How do you, if you like, police this though? How do you, because are you actually traveling around and doing inspections on each individual place, or?
No. So it is, as it stands at the moment, it's a voluntary membership. Somebody would apply and we would ask for specific documents. Have you got qualifications, whatever, to show that you say what you're doing? And then as far as things like the welfare, it's basically just saying these are the standards. Do you apply to this? I mean, at the moment we don't police it, but it is basically putting the emphasis on that individual to say, yes, I do. This is what I do, and I sign up to these values. That's as far as we've got at the moment. It's that, and it's been a big job to get.
I am sure. You're dealing with a lot of strong personalities and very independent-minded people too.
Yeah.
But I think we can all agree that we're in this interesting transition with Equine Assisted World, but people like you and I who kind of ended up in it by default and now are sort of 20 years in, realize that it would be helpful to have some forms of regulation and standardization, and at the same time that can very quickly kill the whole thing. And how do you dance that line? And the answer is that any of us says, well, we don't know, but if we don't try, then shame on us. So I can see the real value of AIR. The meeting that's coming. So listeners, we're doing this interview in early March of 2025, and so Emma, you've just said this meeting will happen on the 8th of April, but presumably if you're listening, if you find this podcast in a year from now, whatever, there'll be more meetings coming up. These AGMs that are happening at Hartbury, are they open, just generally open? Anyone can attend, get information, or how does it go?
It is for membership. We are kind of, again, we've been playing around with the membership a little bit, but we're now kind of changing it so that you can.
But what if you wanted to just come and get information and, okay, all the lads are together? Do you have anything that would be open to, say it was me and I wanted to come and I'm not a member, but I want to find out more about it? Can I come, or how would it work?
Yeah, I think, as I say, the thing to do is go to the Equine Assisted Services Partnership website. There's an awful lot of membership information on that. And we are starting to put more information on. We are doing things that they're calling airtime. So we've got a lady who is running Zooms. And again, it can be for members, but again, there are other people that you can come in and learn from these things. Because again, you don't know whether you want to sign up to this to start with or not.
Sure.
try before you buy almost, don't you?
Indeed.
And then at the one at Hartbury, there's lots of different speakers from all sorts of different modalities talking
So
about.
could someone buy a ticket, for example, to that Hartbury event and just come and listen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need
Information
some
will
horseboy
say-
people to come there. Yeah.
Yeah, information will be on the website. So
Okay.
that's exciting, as I say. And then the whole thing with qualifications, again, I would love to have something where you know that if somebody's got this qualification, that they're at such and such a level. But as
Yeah.
you know, there's 1,001 different qualifications out there. So what this partnership is trying to do is trying to map all the different qualifications,
Mm,
that at least you come into this as a counsellor or dad who's wanting to look for somebody. You can see where all these qualifications go, and that one is level with that one that isn't level with that one. So that's a piece
Right.
of work in itself that is being kind of done at the moment.
So we should probably get you info on our program levels and what those
Yeah.
mean in terms of skill sets so that yeah. Okay. That makes sense because, yeah, for example, a horseboy level 2 in terms of if you've gone through the evaluation process, not just the certification course.
Yeah.
HEIR in Ireland will insure you if we have taken that person through the evaluation, because we then know their standard of equine care, not just their standard of training and riding. But we realize as, for example, horseboy grows, we now have to evolve that so that we can go to the next level of, okay, how do we inspect these yards? Because just because they went through it and did well 2 years ago doesn't mean they are where they are now. And da 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 da. And of course, a lot of organisations have gone through this in the past, like the BHS and whatever. But it's a learning curve for all of us, and it's true. I think we have to work together.
And I think that's a big thing to start with. It's been about getting everybody to buy in to working together, because 10 years ago people were not prepared to work together.
No,
And now
absolutely not.
it's really coming together, and it's really positive. So if we can get that, and then we can suddenly start to say, well, let's start to put some standards that we can all work towards. And yeah, so that's the plan.
Well, if with your permission, I'll try to get a couple of people down to that on April 8th. I myself can't, so I'm going to be in the US, but I'm thinking automatically of Nicole Gillard, who runs our place down in Frome, which is relatively like you as an eventer, and they have medical students coming out from Bristol University doing their electives in mental health, going to Move the Mind, which that's the name of the place. So it's now logical, yes, to add everybody to this network. And what I want listeners, the reason I'm going on about this and asking these questions of Emma is as our field evolves, the only way it's going to really serve the number of people it needs to is if it effectively becomes part of the National Health Service, or if it's in the USA, is funded by just automatically by the big insurance companies. And I'm sitting here in Germany, and that is actually the case. What's called the Kuratorium für therapeutische Reiten, which is the sort of health department of therapeutic riding, is and has been a wing of the government health department for like 3 decades. So they have really led the charge on this. But the difficulty can be that not every equine assisted need can necessarily be met by every modality. So the curatorium itself is running into some issues of its own limitations. And I think that's the same for all of us. So there might be someone that comes to my program and actually saying, well, actually that person might be much, much, much better served by horseback. But A, I need to know about horseback for that. B, I need a relationship with horseback. We need to not be in competition with each other. And we need to really understand what the other one does so we can so that we can come across as a body of professionals rather than a bunch of bossy horsey people in fields or looking at each other suspiciously, which, as you say, 10 years ago it was, despite the very good work that was being done. Have you found that you say got 100 members now on the register? That's impressive.
Yeah.
How have you managed to get the word out there and people to buy in, and what's the message that what's the outreach you've done?
I mean, we obviously had quite a rush to start with because everybody kind of heard about it, and then it's just word of mouth, really, social media, getting out and about there, and just trying to sort of say this is your opportunity to give yourself a voice, to be heard, to learn from everybody else. I mean, that's, I'm a great one for saying everybody learns from everybody. You might learn how you don't want to do something, but you learn how you do want to do something else. I was away on a course last week, and you just learn from everybody. So this is it's a huge opportunity. Don't be so stubborn and think, oh no, I'm doing fine. I'm absolutely, not doing. Yes, you might be doing a fantastic job, but you can do an even better job by learning from somebody else that might want to do photography or something.
No, exactly that. And your whole mentorship system, it's brilliant and it's original. You think it's like the way you were talking about, like, yeah, and we do this and we do, and we have these, this team down south who come up and these, but it's actually a bit mind blowing if you're listening to this from where I'm sitting, because you just answered in one sentence the dilemma of just that gap between manpower and funding that almost every organization hits as it becomes a bit successful.
So the other thing, just on that, Rupert, the funding thing. So again, what we've done is we've had to move away from your standard stuff, and we've been working with our local council, Aberdeenshire Council, and in Scotland we have like an employability spectrum, which is one being you don't have a job, 5 being that you have a job, and everything else in between. And I managed to convince the head of the employability department that we could provide a service to people who were pre-1 and 1. So basically, somebody who is not able to leave the house, or their well-being is so bad that they are just so anxious about, they can't even think about getting a job, they're not going to get to 5. It doesn't matter who you invite them to go and see. So let us spend some time with them. We can work on them. And then we work on them pre-1, we do 1 and 2. And then at that stage, they're ready to engage with other people, social workers, whoever it is, employability organizations, or other members of the employability team, who can then say, right, now let's think about what you might want to do as a job, because now you're confident enough, you're able to interact with other people, you're getting up regularly, you've got some sort of routine. We can help put all these things in place. And that has opened up funding to us from a council point of view, which we didn't have previous. And that has worked with both the youth development programme and it's enabled us to start a community programme. So it's basically a week-long programme where we work with the horses, do all the other activities. And then the latest thing is we're working with the Ukrainian refugees as well. So that's a new thing that we're going to be starting, and it's a blended programme. So there will be some online stuff. And again, you think you can't do this work online, you can. Random, but we learned that through COVID. We weren't able to deliver our programs here because we couldn't have anybody here. So we put together some videos, and we talked and we did some Zooms with a video of the horse, and we were able to do that. And that enables you, yes, ultimately you always want people to be able to come and interact with the horses. But sometimes cost, distance, numbers exclude that. So if you can put together this kind of stuff, then you can feed it to people. They can make all these changes. They might not make as much of a change as if they're actually here. And then they can maybe come here for a day to put all that into practice. So that's what we're doing with some of the Ukrainian community, because again, we've got to do some work to convince them that they want to actually be involved in these programs to start with. So we're just about to take on a Ukrainian social worker who will become part of our team and is funded through this employability program.
And is that social worker sitting in Ukraine and will come in by Zoom, or is here in the UK?
He's an immigrant himself that's come over here, and he's actually been working with the council for the last few years, and they've allowed him to join our team.
Now, when you say you approach the council, okay, and the council's got these Ukrainian refugees, or the council's got these people who can't get out of bed, and they're pre-1 or 1. Not everyone knows how to approach a council, Emma. How do you do that?
It's just about relationships. I mean, you have to basically doggedly find out who people are. In councils, there are so many different departments.
But people also get elected and come and go. So, I mean, let's say you're trying to build something over 2 to 4 years, you might be dealing with this one person is sympathetic and then someone else comes in. So how do you navigate, how do you get that relationship going? Like, a lot of people are just shy. What door do you even knock on? How do you do it? Do you send someone an email? How does it begin? And then how do you navigate?
We started by contacting our local councillors, and you're right, they do change on a regular basis. And you've got your different parties. Get them all out, invite them all out, get them to come and see the work that you're doing. I mean, as I say,
do you find they generally will? Are they usually pretty?
Absolutely, we'll try our local. We've had our local MSPs, we've had our MPs, we've had all.
Okay, so find out who they are and invite them.
Yeah. Okay. People don't understand this type of work until they see it. We're very lucky. We have got Jock, who is an amazing kind of sales front person to do the real, and he loves it. Standing up in front of and giving demonstrations is not everybody's bag, but he loves it. So we're very lucky that we do have that. And then again, the employability team that I got to know through inviting out the head of the employability team. He had no money for probably 8 years. And then one day I phoned him and he said, "You're not going to believe this. The government have just granted us some additional employment funding through this new scheme. So yes, put a grant in and we'll work together and we'll come up with a plan." And that's basically what we've done. And through that, we have managed to get all this. But I mean, it's just.
But without that relationship, he would never have called you to say that.
No, it is. I mean, it's not a well-known enough thing. People, certainly up here, people are not going, "Oh, that send somebody to Equine Assisted, they'll sort it out." Not in a million years. You have got to fight your corner. So you've got to get it's numbers. You've got to contact loads of people. You've got to constantly follow it up, invite people out, send them brochures. I mean, it's just general kind of sales, isn't it, really? Which, when you're delivering at the same time, is really difficult to do.
Yeah, exactly. And looking after your horses. And I think by their very nature, a lot of us that get into this work are fairly maverick and not great lovers of bureaucracy and authoritative systems. But there comes a point where if we don't know how to access them, we can't survive. And again, I think there's just a real need for you to give this sort of mentorship to people. If you've got someone who's standing in a field in Staffordshire doing an amazing job, but no one knows who that person is, are they going to be there in 5 years able to do it still without knowing that you can find out? And how would you even know what department to look up?
I know, because it's not this, again, with us, it's different. Aberdeen City is different to Aberdeenshire.
Right.
It's just, literally, you just have to keep on and keep asking and keep inviting and just, things like, we are a charity, so we can go to trusts and grants. But again, you need to build that relationship. You're going to get regular funding from those funders who understand, appreciate, and have a relationship with you. So it's just the relationship building for an organization like us is really, really important. And that's what's allowed us to keep on and grow and diversify. And again, you have to think out the box. Just because you're working with kids and that's what you love, funding school children for us is virtually impossible, because everybody up here says that the kids should be in school and it's funded by the government and the school. Well, it doesn't happen like that. We all know that. But the lottery and people like that, they won't fund kids during school hours. They'd fund it outside school hours, but our courses run during school hours. So it's just, I'm quite happy, because I say I've gone down all sorts of different paths, and we've diversified and we've changed this and we've adapted that, because you have to, or you won't survive.
Absolutely. Well, I do think people should be in contact with you. So and here's another question. If people want mentorship in how to grow and develop their organizations like that, do you offer trainings and courses in that, or is it more informal? Can people actually hire you as a consultant for this kind of thing? Because the kind of information that you're giving, Emma, it's very needed, and there's a bit of a paucity of people out there who really can help people navigate. So can they contact you? And
yeah, absolutely.
So give us all the contacts.
So our website is www.horseback.org.uk.
Horseback.org.uk.
Yep. My email is emma@horseback.org.uk.
Perfect.
You can follow us on Facebook, again, just HorseBack UK, and we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, believe it or not. So all the socials, we're on all those. We do try and keep those up to date so that you can follow the stories of what's going on and everything. Because again, the funders like to see what's going on. They like to see.
Sure. It's all about story. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear from anybody.
Well, Emma, it's brilliant. I know you've got to go and get on with your evening. I hope that we can reconvene. I'd like to have you back on. I can think of more questions, and I know people have more questions for you and for Jay. Also, it might be nice to get Jock and Taff on, because there's just such a wealth of info. So maybe we can agree that this is the first of 2 or 3 rather than just a one-off.
Yeah.
Because people will have questions. So horseback.org.uk and emma@horseback.org.uk. All right. Well, until the next time, thank you so much for sharing everything you've shared. It's been educational, not just interesting. Like I've learned, I'm thinking, I've got to get a photography thing. This is really good. All right. Till the next time.
Okay. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.